Hey everybody, so it's time to do our 2019-2020 season preview for the Montreal Canadiens. So last season, Montreal just missed the playoffs. They missed it by a couple of points at the end of the year, losing out to Columbus for that final wild card spot. Overall, the Canadiens had a much better season last year than I thought they were going to have. I did not have very high expectations for the Canadiens going into last season, and they ended up being a lot better than I thought, and they had a lot of individual players have really good years last year. Still, it wasn't just quite enough to make the playoffs. So this season, honestly, there aren't a ton of changes for Montreal heading into this year. And to be honest, I think that given the fact that other teams in the Eastern Conference have really gotten better this offseason, and I don't think Montreal's changed all that much, I think it's going to be an even more difficult time for the Canadiens to make the playoffs this year, given the fact that I think, Florida has probably overtaken them as far as the division goes. I think that you're looking at, Boston, Tampa Bay, Toronto being your top three in the Atlantic again. And then Florida, I think, is ready to take that step and become a playoff team in the fourth spot. That's probably going to leave Montreal on the outside looking in, unfortunately for Canadiens fans. But let's take a look at their lineup and see what they've got this year. Top line, now, like I say in all of these preview videos, lineups change, line combinations change all the time. It's very fluid, so don't necessarily read too much into the particular combinations because guys are going to move up and down the lineup. With the top line, at least what I think they'd start out as their top line would be Tomas Tatar, Philip Deneau, and Brendan Gallagher. All of those guys had very good seasons last year, 50-plus point seasons last year. And I think, I don't know if you're going to get that same production out of all of them again. Gallagher had 33 goals. Is he going to do that again? Tatar had 25 goals and 58 points. Is he going to do that again? I think that's the story of the season, of this coming season with the Montreal Canadiens. Are these guys going to do it again? Because as we go throughout the lineup, Domi had a really, really good season last year. A lot of guys had high production seasons for themselves last year. On the back end, you got 45 points out of Jeff Petrie. Is he going to do that again? Shea Weber had a pretty good season once he returned from injury last year. It's the story for this Canadiens team is, are they going to be able to repeat that performance with a lot of these individual players, or did they overachieve last season? And honestly, I'm starting to think that they overachieved last season and that we're going to see them drop back a little bit this year, but that's just my personal opinion. So the second line, Jonathan Drouin, Max Domi, and Paul Byron, that line has the potential to be pretty good as well. But again, maybe Domi takes a step back. 72 points last year for Domi is a great, great year. I don't necessarily think he does that again. I think maybe he drops back to 60, 65 maybe. Third line, you would have Lehkonen, Kotkaniemi, and Joel Armia. Armia coming over last season from Winnipeg. Decent third line there, but again, we'll see how much offense they can provide. How much offense can that line give you? And then the fourth line, you see I have question marks next to all of these guys' names. Nick Cousins, Nate Thompson, Jordan Weal. Basically, I have no clue what the fourth line is going to look like. Montreal has a lot of different options that they could go with there. They also have Dale Weiss. They also have Matthew Pekka, and that's if they want to go in a veteran direction. If they want to go in a younger direction, they've got all these young guys that I have listed down here. Ryan Poling, Nick Suzuki, Charles Hudon. Maybe one, two, or all three of those guys could end up cracking the lineup somewhere. And if that's the case, then you're going to see a pretty different looking lineup from what I have here if some of those young guys can step in and play a regular NHL shift. So the thing with Montreal heading into this year is there are a lot of questions about what this lineup is going to look like. This I just threw together, but man, I mean, they've got, I think Ryan Poehling has a very good chance of making this team. So that, okay, then you knock out Nate Thompson, but do you really want a young player like Poehling and someone with the offensive talent of Poehling being a fourth-line center? Then who would he may not have a choice because none of these guys are really fourth-line guys. Does Nick Suzuki come in and make the team? Then, does he play on a wing somewhere? Does Charles Hudon come in and take a wing spot away from somebody like a Nick Cousins or a Jordan Wheel? There are a lot of open positions up for competition in training camp this year with Montreal. These young guys, I think, are going to get a chance to prove that they belong in the NHL. These veteran guys, especially like someone like Dale Weiss and Nate Thompson, are, fighting just to stay at the NHL level at this point. They're much older guys on the downturn of their careers. They're just looking for a job at this point. So there's going to be a lot of competition, especially amongst the forward group in Montreal Canadiens training camp this year. I absolutely believe that. And I think that while this is maybe what a lineup would look like now, I think that it could look very different come the beginning of October when this team hits the ice for regular season action. I think you could see a lot more youth sprinkled into this lineup. Moving on to the defense, you have Shea Weber and Victor Mete as your top pair. Second pair, Jeff Petrie and Ben Sherratt. Sherratt coming over in free agency from the Winnipeg Jets. That's a pretty nice depth D addition, I think, for the Canadiens. I'm not a huge fan of him being in the top four. I think Ben Sherratt is a good bottom pair defenseman. I really don't think he's a top four defenseman, but Montreal doesn't have a lot of top four defensemen. They've really, they've got a lot of bottom pair defensemen in that lineup, including their bottom pair of Brett Kulak and Christian Folin. They also have Mike Riley, who would be the seventh defenseman. There's not a ton of talent with this defense core. It's a lot of those, bottom pair type guys. Not seeing a ton of talent. Certainly not, explosive offensive talent from this group. Jeff Petrie is your best offensive defenseman, and Shea Weber can certainly still bring it from the point, but he's 34 now and certainly, slowing down as far as point totals go. So we'll see with them defensively. I still think that's a huge weakness of this team is their defense core. They've lost Jordy Ben off of it, but again, they lose Jordy Ben. What was Jordy Ben? Another bottom pair defenseman. So getting to the goaltending now, Carey Price is obviously the starter, and then Keith Kincaid has been brought in to back him up. So that will be your goaltending duo. I don't think this is a playoff team, honestly. I'm worried about, secondary scoring. I don't know if they have enough offense to get quality secondary scoring. Their defense core, to me, just doesn't have enough pure talent in it. It's a lot of bottom pair defensemen. It's those hard-working, defensive-minded, just trying to stay in the league, type bottom pair defensemen. Guys like Christian Folin, guys like Brett Kulak, guys like Mike Riley, guys like Ben Sherratt. They're just trying to stay in the league, really. They're not going to bring a ton of, game-changing talent to the table. I don't think there's enough there defensively. For this team to make the playoffs, they would need guys like Max Domi and Jonathan Drouin and Brendan Gallagher and Tomas Tatar to have monster years this year. Real breakout offensive monster years. They also would need this guy right here to revert back to the Carey Price of 6, 7, 8 years ago, where he was literally the most unbeatable goaltender in the league at all times and was consistently, by far the best goalie. Price hasn't been that the last few years. His numbers have started to drop off. He's certainly, he's 30 plus now. And I think those days are kind of behind him, but they would need an absolutely monster season out of Carey Price to have a chance to make the playoffs. Basically, for me, it's going to come down to Florida versus Montreal for that 4th spot in the Atlantic Division. I think your top 3 is set with Toronto, Boston, and Tampa Bay. I think, for this team to make the playoffs, it would be as a wild card team, and they would have to beat out Florida for that 4th spot. I don't know if they have the offense to do that. I don't know if they have the defense core to do that. It would really take a huge year once again from a lot of players. Carey Price, first and foremost, would have to be outstanding, and then they would need Max Domi. They would need Jonathan Drouin. They would need Dano, Gallagher, and Tatar to all have huge years, many of whom had big years last year. They would need a repeat performance to really have a chance. But so I don't see this team making the playoffs. Maybe they can surprise me. I still think that they're missing a little bit to jump from that kind of good middle of the pack average NHL team up to a playoff level really good team. I think they're missing a little bit. They're missing some offense, some secondary scoring for sure, and then that defense core. That defense core would really benefit from bringing in another top 4 defenseman. If they can bring in one top 4 defenseman, I think that would really shake things up and improve them defensively. But where it stands right now, I just don't see this team making the playoffs. I think they'll be close. They're not going to be horrible. They're not going to be a terrible team. But they're probably going to miss the playoffs by 5-6 points, something like that, come the end of the season. But that's just what I think. Let me know what you think down in the comment section below. Like, comment, share, subscribe. Follow on social media. All those links are down in the description. If you'd like to further support the channel, the links to our Patreon and merchandise store are down in the description as well. Keep spreading the word about this channel. Let's keep this thing growing. Thank you very much for watching. Hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll talk to you guys soon.